Ruth and Siva are members of our 10 a.m. congregation. Importantly, they're married. They're allowed to stand this close to each other. They also work in the medical field, and most importantly, they're both followers of Christ. Both of you have been following Jesus, well, for many years now. Can you tell us each, how did you come to believe in Jesus?
Yeah, I'll go first. Well, I was actually brought up in the Catholic faith, and I remember being drawn to God from a very early age, but I never really understood what it was to have a relationship with Him, because all I knew was to follow the rituals and sacraments, and I tried very hard for a long time, but just never felt that I was getting anywhere. I never had any assurance that God was even there, real, or that He noticed me, or whether what I was doing was good enough for me to get to heaven. And so I became quite disillusioned with the whole religious idea and gave it all away. But lucky for me, my life circumstances changed. My family immigrated to Australia when I was in my late teens, and then going through university, my path, well, I guess it was ordained by God, but my path was crossed with a Christian friend who prayed for me and challenged my unbelief. Yeah. And to cut a very, very long story short, God revealed Himself to me quite miraculously, I think, and I made that commitment to follow Jesus, again without really understanding what that commitment meant. Yeah. Not long after that, a friend asked me to help her with Sunday school. And I think I was the one that learned the most that year in Sunday school. Finally reading the Bible, like a lot of the Bible stories were familiar to me, but reading them in context. Yeah. I think my eyes were open to the true nature of grace and forgiveness. I came to realise that I didn't need to work hard at all, really, to be right with God. God's done the work already in Jesus. Yep. My job was just to accept Him, to continue accepting Him, and to live for Him. Fantastic. You wouldn't be the first Sunday school teacher or ministry to children who learnt more than the kids did. But that's wonderful. And that idea of, I'm committing to Jesus even though I don't know where it'll go, that's a great way to start. Siva, was it a similar journey for you or different?
Similar in some ways. I grew up as a Hindu, going to the temples and doing all the pujas and all those things. But my parents went to Christian schools all their life, and so they were fairly open-minded. They had the typical Hindu attitude of, one house, different ways to get into the house. So religion is a bit like that. Going to God is like you got different ways to get to God, And I went to lots of Christian schools, so I had lots of ideas of what Christianity was, or what Christian beliefs were, but didn't mean anything. I knew who Jesus was, I knew what Christmas was, and things like that. But it didn't really mean anything, at that time, until I think it was about year 12 when I was doing the HSC. One of the local Presi churches had their 60th anniversary or something like that, so they put some news leaflets in our letterbox. I said, "Oh, that sounds all right." And there was a thing about youth group on a Sunday night. It was a good way to get out of studying on doing the HSC. So I went along and met some really, really encouraging people, who were a few years older than me, who were more mature Christians. I wasn't a Christian at all, who actually took me under their, wings and, they guided me, and they encouraged me, yes. And then when I went to uni again, there were times when I was questioning, just like all uni students, what Christianity was all about, when you get influenced by lots of other non-Christian influences, and I fell away a bit. Then there was, again, and we had a Presbyterian youth camp, and that's where I actually met David Burke, who's the guy who eventually married us. A few years later, he was going to be our new minister, and he was the main speaker at the Presi camp. And so it was actually big. He was very instrumental in me continuing to follow Jesus, because he sort of kept encouraging me,
Yes.
and along with the other friends I met through church. So it was it's a long, slow process.
Yes.
And I think I'm still, learning, what's it about, and there's been lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is to actually be able to learn that it's really growing up as a Hindu. You earned your way to heaven or earned your way to salvation. But here, learning and accepting that it's not me, it's by the grace of God.
Yes.
And what Jesus had done on the cross, which is something that's totally, that's a foreign concept.
Yeah.
To me, growing up as a kid,
Yep.
So that took a long time to, think, but by grace of God, I'm still here and still trusting in Him.
Absolutely.
Especially all these current crises, so it's been a very encouraging, to have come through all that stuff over the years, to be able to get to this position of being able to put your trust in God.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Another story of grace, but picking up particularly the impact of other people along the way, and the reality it is a process as we go. This weekend marks Anzac Day. It was a different kind of Anzac Day for us, not gathering. Later in the service, we're going to be praying with regard to that. But many have likened the current COVID situation to being like a war, and medical people are on the front line. If I can direct a question to you, Siva, how can people be supporting, doctors, others in the medical field? How can we be supporting and praying for you guys?
I think the first thing, and then probably the most important thing, is we could thank God that we are actually being spared by God's grace.
Yeah.
The trauma and the crisis that the rest of the world is undergoing.
Yes.
And especially in Lithgow, we've been very blessed because we barely had any cases, and we got a very good system of health, so not just doctors, but the general health, system in Australia, been spared all the major traumas. So that we could thank God for it.
Right.
We could thank God for the government and how proactive they've been in how they've done things compared to certain other countries. I won't mention names.
Best not to. Don't know where people are watching.
So I think we've been very blessed that we've been very proactive in what we have done, and also that we had the resources to be able to do it, not just personnel, but also the financial means and all that PPE gear and all those things. So we've been very blessed. At the same time, I think there are lots of people who are stressed. Physically and emotionally and financially by this. So not just patients and general population, but even health personnel,
Yes.
They're worried about their personal health.
Yes.
And how they're going to cope with this, if they caught COVID, and it probably has sort of opened my eyes to how people are uncertain of their future.
Yes.
And I gotta admit, I've been quite at peace with this. And I think a lot of it is because of my reassurance in my future, which is probably different to watching a few of my colleagues who are very, very stressed about not wanting to work in public areas and things like that, because they are very terrified of catching COVID and dying and not knowing the future. And I think it will be good to pray for them, and also praying for that we continue to have the skills and the compassion to actually deal with the population, and the patients and people that we come across.
They're really helpful things. Thank you, Siva. That's helpful. Lots of things to pray for there. Ruth, if we're going to have a final question for you, this is also really a spiritual battle. I mean, we're always in a spiritual battle, but at the moment, what's keeping you strong in your faith?
Lots of things, actually, but I might just mention one or two. The first one is prayer. Now, I remember towards the end of March when COVID started becoming real to us in Australia, I started feeling really anxious. And I'm not an anxious person, but there were quite a few days there when I was very anxious. And then all of a sudden, I just was at peace. That peace that defies understanding. But I only joined the dots after I got a few text messages from friends saying that they were praying for me.
Yes.
So I'm not very diligent and disciplined in my prayer life, but I'm very thankful for all those prayer warriors out there that are praying for us, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. And the general assurance, like Siva mentioned, about knowing where my future is with God. And so it doesn't matter, you know, he works for the good of all those who trust in him.
Absolutely.
I think those things. I'm loving online church. It's
Good.
been fantastic, really encouraging.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.